Leanne is the owner with her family of Spry Farm in Devlin, Ontario. In 2019, Leanne left her career in marketing to offer agritourism opportunities within Northwestern Ontario's Rainy River District. The Spry Farms tours and petting zoos have gained in popularity since opening in 2016, allowing guests to get up close and personal with a variety of farm favorites and to enjoy a little taste of life on the farm. Leanne?
Hi, and thank you for the introduction and for inviting me to speak today. This is the first presentation that I have made on behalf of my business and regarding a topic that I hold a personal interest in, so that's exciting for me. And this is also probably the first time I've been public speaking since college 10 years ago, so bear with me. Now, before I jump in, over the past year, our experiences over the past year, I just want to provide a little background information about myself, my business, where we're located, how we got started in agritourism and whatnot. So the Spry Farm is located in Devlin, Ontario. That's a small town in northwestern Ontario. For those of you who are unfamiliar with where that is, the easiest way to describe it is that we are 4 hours west of Thunder Bay and 4 hours east of Winnipeg, Manitoba. I am a wife to my husband, Tyler, the farm's master beekeeper, and a mom to two very busy boys, Henry, who is 7, and Waylon, who is 5. You'll see them making their way through the slideshow, two little blonde cuties. My professional background is in the communications field, specifically graphic design, web development, and marketing. I spent the majority of my youth and adult life showing quarter horses on the AQHA circuits, so that was kind of my segue into the agricultural realm. In 2015, my husband and I built our home on my family's farm, and I had an itch to own a few animals that I had never had growing up, so we started adding to our menagerie. It started with some chickens, and since we have also added pygmy goats, pot-bellied pigs, ponies, and miniature donkeys. I always joke that chickens are the gateway drug to hobby farming, so you've been warned. Operating an agritourism business was never really our intention, but it came into existence and evolved out of a necessity, I guess. It was actually a bit of a fluke that we got into offering agritourism services. It was in 2016 when a girlfriend of mine who was working for the local school board asked if she could bring her kindergarten class for a farm field trip. We said, of course, and since then we have developed our hobby farm into a successful seasonal agritourism business. Over the past 5 years, the demand for agritourism experiences has steadily continued to grow, and our services have evolved as we test drove a few different options. But in the end, we settled on experiences that required the least amount of manpower and guaranteed the most revenue. So as of 2020, 2021 now, we offer scheduled farm tours, petting zoos, and we also host one public admission-based fall farm event. Our farm clientele is definitely a local one. We host mainly educational, social service, and First Nation organizations that are typically booking larger groups, mainly of children, to visit the farm. But families with children are also a great part or a large part of our customer base. Our petting zoo services are popular with community events. We always say nothing draws a crowd like animals. And our public farm event has become very popular with families in the area who come out to meet the animals and take a hay wagon ride, play the yard games, and purchase pumpkins from our pumpkin patch. It was in 2019, as I was working a full-time job in marketing, when the booking requests for agritourism services were in such high demand that I was able to quit my job and pursue the Spry Farm business full-time. I remember a year prior to this, my boss at the time joking, "Please don't leave us to be a farmer." And I, in all honesty at the time, I responded, "No worries, there's no money in it." But we consider 2019 our first official year in business, as we were operating full-time, seasonally. Our season is typically May through September. But we had an incredibly successful year in 2019 from a financial perspective, with the most bookings and visitors that we have received to date. And since I wasn't working elsewhere, it really provided us with the opportunity to schedule every booking request that came in. And we really got our name out in the community and a buzz going about the farm. So we were really excited to get rolling again and keep the momentum up in 2020. And then unfortunately, COVID brought us to a screeching halt. I remember when the first lockdown was announced in March of 2020, and just the feeling of uncertainty stemming around the pandemic as a whole, it really left us with a lot of questions that no one had the answers to. So trying to plan ahead forced us to make some tough decisions in a relatively short period of time. Since our agritourism season typically runs May through September, and since school groups, summer programs, and community events create the bulk of our customer base, when it looked as though schools would not be completing the 2020 year in person, and with summer programs and events slowly being canceled one by one, we had to make the ultimate decision of whether it was reasonable for us to operate or not. On a typical year, our commercial insurance is very reasonable and easily covered within our business revenues. However, when considering the possible limitations on group sizes, or quite frankly, knowing there was a real possibility of not being able to operate at all, or for only part of the season, it was early April when we decided not to renew our insurance policy. And we officially made the announcement of the cancellation of all of our agritourism services for 2020. So there we were, declaring 2020 as a write-off in terms of agritourism. Now we're fortunate in a sense that our business is very much in kind of the startup phase, all things considered, and that we operate seasonally compared to a lot of businesses who have been operating for years and whose revenues affect their livelihood. And that's just not our reality at this point in time. We did take the opportunity to brainstorm what alternative revenue possibilities we could take advantage of, and also took some time to tackle projects that we would not typically take on in a non-COVID year. As we got started planning for all of these alternative revenue streams, a family member actually came across an article and forwarded it along to us, and it was featuring an animal sanctuary in the States that was offering virtual farm tours in light of COVID. And so they suggested that we should give it a go. My first thought was, no one's going to want to pay for a virtual farm tour. And my second thought was, how do I justify a rate that is less than our in-person tours, but is enough to make it worth my time? We had a handful of virtual learning classrooms book virtual tours with us. But I think that with everyone trying to navigate this new way of doing things, that the virtual tours were just kind of far from the teacher's radar in lieu of just navigating, the online classroom as a whole. But the few virtual tours that we did book were not without their challenges. Keeping a virtual tour engaging enough for 4 to 6 year olds is not easy. Working out technology inconsistencies was another challenge to the online offerings. But we were proactive in troubleshooting ahead of time. I remember doing a few test runs around the farm with my family to find out where the dead zones were and, the areas that got the best reception, because our farm's on 5 acres and we kind of have to make our way around to the different pens and whatnot to show everybody everything. But in the end, the tours went off without a hitch, but our revenues were really low on them, but that was to be expected going in. So far for 2021, schools within our area are operating in person. And so long as that continues, we're hoping that school groups will be able to visit us this year. But we are also prepared to offer petting zoo services to each school if them traveling off of school property is not a possibility. So that would best accommodate the COVID guidelines, to keep kids in school and still provide them with a great farm experience, all things considered. We had raised Cornish cross chickens for personal consumption in 2019. So we decided, what? Let's raise a second batch of birds to sell as pasture-raised poultry this year. Our pasture-raised poultry was very popular, and we had nearly all of them sold prior to processing. However, when we broke down the financials of the expenses that go into raising these birds, including price per chick, feed, processing costs from our local abattoir, we profited a whopping $70 on 65 birds. This also didn't factor in our time, our gas, our mileage, electrical costs for heat lamps, etc. So in reality, we really didn't make a profit. Moving forward, we're not going to produce chickens for sale. We have decided that our birds raised for personal consumption will serve as an educational part of our farm tours moving forward. We'd really like to try to close that gap of people knowing where their food comes from and hopefully inspire some others to raise their own meat. We took the opportunity to expand the size of our apiary. My husband wanted to try some new hive splitting techniques that would double to triple the number of colonies we had. This, of course, meant sacrificing honey volume and sales for 2020, but it would pay off tenfold for our sales in 2021 as we'd have, double to triple the number of hives. We harvested enough honey in 2020 to sell to family, which still made us a decent profit, so we're thankful for that. And we had a constant stream of local honey requests made in 2020 that we unfortunately were not able to fulfill. But so far for 2021, things are looking very promising for our colonies, and a very large honey harvest and sales are predicted for this year. So we're excited about that. We have always had a very large garden, and last year we decided to grow as much as we could and sell any excess produce we had. In short, these efforts were a complete bust. The only items that we ended up with enough excess of were lettuce and butternut and spaghetti squash. I'm very conscious about making sure any product that we sell is quality, and specifically for the produce, that it would have a decent shelf life. Unfortunately, the time and efforts to accomplish this are incredibly time consuming. So after 8 hours of harvesting, washing, drying, and packaging, one round of lettuce, I definitely did not make a profit, all things considered. On top of that, we also got an unusually early frost in 2020, so we ended up having to harvest all of our vine plants much earlier than usual. Nothing was ripe, and I ended up babying it on my front porch for a few weeks, just willing it to ripen, moving it into the sun during the day, and then back against the building and tucking it in at night. But and the squash never did ripen well enough for me to feel comfortable selling it, so that was unfortunate. But the only produce that has held its value for us in both COVID and non-COVID times is our pumpkins. Over the past few years, we've hosted a fall farm event, which included a pumpkin patch. We've always been very successful in our pumpkin sales, and they have become quite popular in the area. We grow traditional jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, white hybrids, and small sugar pumpkins that are not only adorable as fall decor, but they also make a mean pumpkin pie filling. So in 2020, we grew a very large pumpkin patch, our largest yet, in hopes that the pandemic would be over by the time our fall farm event rolled around, but that even if it wasn't, that we would have our pumpkin sales. Thankfully, our pumpkins did ripen, and we sold out very quickly and actually made a really decent profit on them. By September, when we typically hold our fall farm event, COVID restrictions had been lifted in our area, and we could have hosted the pumpkin patch event, but we had already foregone our insurance policy for the season. And without knowing what kind of turnout we'd have, we couldn't justify covering the expensive one-day event insurance, which is just about double what we pay for the year. So even throughout the entirety of this pandemic, we have constantly had people requesting visits and asking if we are still open. And so the demand for agritourism services were still very high. But, quite frankly, on a personal note of social responsibility, we also didn't want to be the reason for a COVID outbreak in our area as the result of us hosting an event. So, you have control to do everything possible to make your event or service safe. But the one thing you can't control are your customers prior to visiting. And all it takes is one person to bring the walls crumbling down. And we live in a small community where everybody knows everybody. So it strikes especially close to home for us. And, I personally have family members who we see regularly who have autoimmune illnesses. And I just didn't want to take the chance of harming anyone or being the reason that, there was an outbreak in our area. We have been finding, as we explore these new revenue streams, specifically regarding food products, honey excluded from this, that unless you're producing and selling very large quantities, you're just not making a profit in our area. For us to have made a profit on our birds, we probably would have had to do 3 times the amount of birds, and then even then our profits would not be anything special, quite frankly. Um, as our 2020 agritourism season came to a close, we started asking ourselves some really tough questions about where we see the business headed long term. As we looked around at all of our livestock and poultry, half of which we purchased to provide a little more diversity to our agritourism services, we asked ourselves, what would we keep if we didn't offer agritourism services anymore? What aspects of the business are most lucrative and have the most potential for growth? We asked ourselves, what other possibilities does our location, our skills, and our lifestyle allow us to offer? And so after some long and very frank conversations, we developed a sustainable long-term plan for the Spry farm and made the following decisions. As our agritourism services are all seasonal in nature, we decided that we needed to add a product or a service that would be a year-round bread and butter for the business, as it were. This product or service would allow us to continue on with providing the agritourism experiences and to expand our beekeeping operation, but to keep revenues coming in year-round. This is when we decided to expand the business to include canine services, specifically dog boarding and training. This year, we will be constructing a dog boarding and training facility that's also a half honey house where we will winter our bees indoors. And the dog boarding and training will operate year round, as we have received just an overwhelmingly positive response from the community so far. The years spent operating our agritourism services definitely built an excellent reputation that laid the foundation for this expansion. When people come and they see how well you take care of your own animals and how well behaved they are, they feel good about their own animals, being cared for by you. So all in all, 2020 challenged us to brainstorm, to try new things, to learn from our failures, and to be patient. It allowed us the time to do a little soul searching and reevaluate our goals. I personally have never felt as secure in my business as I do now. I'm confident about the success we'll have in the future in all aspects of the business, from the addition of our canine services to the growth of our beekeeping and honey operation, and to the continued success of our agritourism services that started it all. We're already gearing up for a fun-filled agritourism season, and we welcome you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The handle is @thespryfarm. We promise you a daily smile. People tell us all the time how they enjoy seeing our, quote, beautiful photos, funny stories, and sweet videos. I want to say thank you so much to Jennifer Wall of the Rainy River District our Rainy River District Agricultural Development Advisor, for putting my name forth as a presenter, and to Carolyn and David for inviting me to present and for being so kind and welcoming. And thank you all for letting me yak at you for the past 15 minutes. And I hope it was helpful, and that it inspires you to do something that you love. Follow your passions.
Leanne, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I loved the photographs that you were able to provide.
Thank you.
Looks like a lovely farm and a lovely family.
Thank you.
We are going to limit just to 2 questions. Given our event overall has been stretching on a little more than we anticipated, which is all very good. Other questions will get answered online after the fact. We'll start with the first question here. Your logo is amazing. Can you talk about the importance, I just lost part of that, of a strong logo for your operation?
Sure.
Branding for your agritourism business.
Sure. First of all, thank you. I designed that logo. And a strong logo or brand for agritourism, or any business, really any business. I'm just going to tout this, with my background in graphic design and marketing. You need to have a really strong brand in order to connect with your customers long term. And I always say to my husband, our logo and our brand that we've developed and whatnot over the past couple of years has been huge in our success, and people putting a face to the business and knowing who you are and knowing the services you offer and the reputation that you hold. It's just so much a part of your identity that it's incredibly important to have a strong brand.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As I see these pictures go by, I want them all for our agritourism advertising.
Right.
Next question is, do you anticipate extending your season beyond May and October?
Right. We get asked this quite a bit. We've kind of narrowed our season to May through October based on when we've organically been having services requested. And it kind of drops off after that because I know with most of you in Southern Ontario, it gets very cold here. So I don't know how many people would want to come out in the cold, and it also gets quite wet and sludgy in the springtime and if we have a wet fall. But we have had a lot of people ask us about like winter sleigh rides, and we are looking to add that down the line to our services as well, but probably in a 5-year plan.
All right. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Leanne.
Thank you.
I'll mention that there were other questions, and we will have those. We'll take those up on our online answer form on the website later on. Thank
Great.
you so much.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a wonderful day, and we're going to move on to our next speaker,